The alarm clock screams at 6:30 a.m. and I slap it into silence with the practiced motion of someone who's been doing this dance for 3 years running. The apartment is cold, gray light filtering through blinds that haven't been cleaned since I moved in. Outside, the city hums with its endless mechanical heartbeat, traffic, construction, the distant wail of sirens. It's the sound of 8 million people pretending they're not, all slowly drowning in the same fluorescent-lit mundane. I stumble through the morning routine, shower that runs lukewarm at best, coffee from a machine that makes bitter sludge, toast that tastes like cardboard. The mirror reflects back a 26-year-old man who looks older, worn down by spreadsheets and meetings about meetings, by the particular exhaustion that comes from spending your days pushing numbers around for a company that makes widgets you've never seen for people you'll never meet. The subway ride downtown is a meditation in human misery. Bodies pressed together, everyone staring at phones or into the middle distance, collectively pretending we're not all sardines in a can, hurtling through tunnels that smell like piss and broken dreams. I used to read on these rides back when I first moved here with grand ideas about the city transforming me into someone interesting. Now I just close my eyes and count the stops. 23rd Street, Union Square, 14th Canal. My stop. The office building is one of those glass and steel monuments to corporate blandness. The kind where you need a keycard to access the elevators and the air conditioning is always either too hot or too cold. I work on the 15th floor for a company that does something with data analytics for retail optimization, which is a fancy way of saying we help big stores figure out where to put the cereal so people buy more of it. Is not what I imagined I'd be doing when I was 22 and full of fire, fresh out of college with an English degree and dreams of writing the next great American novel. But student loans don't care about your artistic aspirations, and neither does rent in Manhattan. The job is fine, my colleagues are fine, my boss is fine, everything is aggressively, suffocatingly fine. Except for Tuesday morning when I discovered the coffee shop. I'd been getting my caffeine fix from the Starbucks in the lobby of my building, along with every other drone in a 5-block radius. The line was always long, the baristas always frazzled, the coffee always slightly burned. It was efficient, predictable, and soul-crushing, everything my life had become. But that Tuesday, the espresso machine was broken, and desperation drove me 3 blocks south to a narrow storefront I'd walked past 100 times without really seeing. The hand-painted sign above the door read "Grind Coffee" in faded green letters. And through the windows, I could see a warm light and people who looked like they were actually enjoying their morning. The moment I stepped inside, something shifted. It wasn't just the smell, though God, the smell was incredible. Fresh roasted beans with hints of chocolate and caramel. The rich aroma so thick you could practically taste it. It wasn't just the warmth either, though after the air-conditioned tomb of my office building, the cozy heat felt like an embrace. It was something else, something I couldn't quite name. The space was small, maybe a dozen tables crammed between exposed brick walls lined with shelves of coffee beans and vintage brewing equipment, mismatched chairs, plants hanging in macrame holders, local art covering every available inch of wall space. It looked like someone's living room if that someone had impeccable taste and a serious caffeine addiction. The line was short, 3 people ahead of me, all of them seeming to know exactly what they wanted and appearing in no particular hurry to get it. There was something different about the energy here, less frantic than every other coffee place in the city. People lingered. They made eye contact. They smiled at strangers. And then I saw him. He was behind the counter, probably around my age, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it and warm brown eyes that seemed to actually see the people he was serving rather than just processing them like units in a transaction. He wore a faded green apron over a gray Hanley, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and when he handed a drink to the woman ahead of me, he said something that made her laugh, actually laugh, not the polite chuckle you give service workers. "What can I get started for you?" he asked when it was my turn, and his voice was exactly what I expected. Warm, slightly raspy, like he'd just woken up or spent the previous evening talking until dawn. I ordered my usual large coffee, black, nothing fancy, and watched as he moved around the cramped space behind the counter with an easy efficiency that spoke of someone who'd been doing this for a while and genuinely enjoyed it. His hands were quick and sure as he worked the espresso machine, muscles in his forearms shifting as he tamped the grounds and guided the portafilter into place. The machine hissed and gurgled, that comforting coffee shop symphony that I'd somehow never really noticed before. Steam rose from the milk pitcher with a soft whoosh, and underneath it all was the gentle clink of cups and spoons, the murmur of conversation, the rustle of newspaper pages turning. "First time in?" he asked as he handed me the cup, and I nodded, suddenly aware that I was staring. "Yeah, my usual place had a broken machine." "Lucky us," he said with a smile that did something strange to my chest. "I'm Alex, by the way, in case you decide to come back." "David," I replied, taking the cup from his hands. Our fingers brushed for just a second, calloused fingertips against mine, and I felt that small contact like an electric shock. The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth, with none of the burnt bitterness I'd gotten used to from the chain places, but more than that, it was made with care, with attention by someone who clearly gave a damn about what he was doing. I found a small table by the window and settled in with my laptop, telling myself I'd just check emails before heading to the office. But the truth was, I didn't want to leave. The morning light streaming through the glass was golden and soft, nothing like the harsh fluorescence waiting for me 15 floors up. Around me, people were reading actual books, writing in journals, having conversations that seemed to matter. It felt like a pocket of real life hidden in the middle of the city's relentless machinery. When I finally forced myself to pack up and leave, Alex looked up from the espresso machine and gave me a small wave. "See you tomorrow, David," he called out, and something about the way he said my name, like he was already planning to remember it, made my heart skip. I told myself I'd go back to Starbucks the next day. It was closer, more convenient, and I didn't need another complication in my carefully controlled routine. But Wednesday morning found me walking those 3 extra blocks again. "Large coffee, black," Alex said before I could speak, already reaching for a cup. His smile was wider today, more familiar, and I felt something warm unfold in my chest. "You remembered." "It's a gift," he said with mock solemnity, then grinned. "Plus, you looked like you needed it pretty badly yesterday. Rough job?" "Is it that obvious?" "You have the look of someone who spends a lot of time under fluorescent lights," he said, starting the espresso machine. "I know it well. Used to have an office job myself." "What made you switch to this?" He gestured around the coffee shop with obvious affection. "Better hours, better people, and I get to make something that actually makes people happy, even if it's just for 10 minutes in the morning." The machine finished its cycle, and he poured the dark liquid into my cup with practiced precision. This time, when he handed it to me, his fingers lingered against mine for just a moment longer than necessary. Plus, he added, his voice dropping just slightly, the view's not bad some mornings. I felt heat rise in my cheeks and told myself he was talking about the window facing the street, not about me. But the way he was looking at me suggested otherwise, and I found myself stammering something about being late for work before practically fleeing the shop. The coffee was perfect again. I sipped it during the elevator ride up to my floor and felt that same warm comfort spreading through me, chasing away the morning chill and the existential dread that usually accompanied my commute. Thursday, I was back again. This time I was ready for his smile, for the easy familiarity of his greeting. Let me guess, large coffee, black. You're good at this. Years of practice, he said, but there was something different in his voice today, something more serious. Though I have to ask, is black coffee really your favorite, or is it just what you think you should order? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, I've been making coffee for 5 years, and I can usually tell when someone's drinking what they actually want versus what they think they should want. He leaned against the counter, studying my face with those warm brown eyes. You drink it like medicine, not like something you enjoy. It's just simpler, I guess. Less decisions to make in the morning. He nodded like this confirmed something he'd suspected. What if I made you something different? Just once. If you hate it, I'll never suggest anything else, and your boring black coffee is on the house. I should have said no. I should have stuck with my routine, my predictable order, my carefully maintained boundaries between customer and service provider. But there was something about the way he was looking at me, not pushy or salesy, just genuinely curious, that made me nod. Okay, surprise me. His face lit up like I'd just agreed to something much more significant than a coffee drink. I watched him work, noting the extra care he took selecting beans from one of the glass containers behind the counter. He ground them fresh, the rich aroma filling the air between us, then began a complex dance with the espresso machine and steam wand that was almost hypnotic to watch. His movements were fluid, confident, like a musician who knew his instrument inside and out. This is a cortado, he said, sliding the cup across to me. Spanish drink, equal parts espresso and warm milk. It's strong like your black coffee, but smoother, more balanced. I took a tentative sip and my eyes widened involuntarily. The flavor was incredible, all the richness and intensity of espresso, but mellowed by the silky milk, creating something that was both bold and gentle at the same time. Holy shit, I said, then immediately flushed. Sorry, I didn't mean to. No, that's exactly the reaction I was hoping for, Alex said, grinning broadly. So I take it you don't hate it? I searched for words that wouldn't sound ridiculous. It's really good, like really good. Better than medicine? Much better than medicine. He looked pleased, proud even, and I realized this wasn't just about coffee for him. This was craft, artistry, someone who genuinely cared about his work and found joy in sharing it with others. I'll remember that, he said. Cortado for David has a nice ring to it. I stayed longer that morning, savoring both the drink and the warm atmosphere of the shop. Alex caught my eye several times as he served other customers. Each glance accompanied by a small smile that made my pulse quicken. I told myself I was just appreciating good customer service, but the truth was harder to ignore. I was developing a crush on my barista. Friday morning I walked in to grind coffee with something approaching anticipation rather than my usual grim determination to caffeinate and survive another day. Cortado? Alex asked, already reaching for the milk. Actually, I said, surprising myself. What would you drink if you could have anything in the shop right now? What would you make for yourself? He paused, milk pitcher halfway to the steam wand, and looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or interest. You sure you want to go down that rabbit hole? I have some pretty strong opinions about coffee. Try me. Okay. He set down the pitcher and cracked his knuckles theatrically. But don't blame me if this ruins every other coffee experience for the rest of your life. He selected beans from a different container, Ethiopian single origin, he explained as he worked, and began grinding them by hand in a ceramic burr grinder that looked like it belonged in someone's grandmother's kitchen. This is going to take a few minutes, he said, continuing to turn the crank with steady, rhythmic motions. Pour-over coffee isn't fast food, but that's kind of the point. I found myself leaning against the counter, watching his hands work the grinder. There was something meditative about the repetitive motion, the soft grinding sound, the way his whole body was engaged in this simple task. You know, he said, not looking up from his work. Most people are in such a hurry in the morning. Coffee becomes just fuel, something to dump into your system so you can function. But some of the best parts of the day happen when you slow down long enough to actually notice them. Is that your coffee philosophy? Part of it. He finished grinding and began setting up an elaborate pour-over apparatus, ceramic dripper, paper filter, gooseneck kettle, that he filled with precise attention to water temperature. I also believe that how someone drinks their coffee says something about how they approach life. People who order extra hot drinks are usually running late and stressed. People who get decaf are often trying to convince themselves they don't need something they actually do need. People who order black coffee are boring, I supplied. Are afraid of asking for what they really want, he said gently, beginning the slow process of pouring hot water over the grounds in careful, concentric circles. Nothing wrong with that, we all do it in different ways. The coffee bloomed under the water, releasing an aroma so complex and intoxicating I found myself closing my eyes to better appreciate it. When I opened them, Alex was watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. You really love this, I said. It's not just a job for you. No, he agreed. It's definitely not just a job. The brewing process took nearly 5 minutes, and we stood in comfortable silence as the coffee slowly dripped into the cup below. Around us, the morning rush was picking up, but Alex seemed completely focused on the task at hand, unbothered by the growing line of customers. Don't you need to help other people? I asked, suddenly aware that I was monopolizing his time. Maya's got it, he said, nodding toward a woman with purple hair who was working the other espresso machine with quick efficiency. Besides, this is important. Important? Your coffee education, he said with a smile that made my stomach flip. Can't have you going back to that corporate swill after tasting the good stuff. When the pour-over was finally ready, he handed it to me with something approaching ceremony. Ethiopian yirgacheffe, he said. Natural process, light roast. It's going to taste like nothing you've had before. He wasn't wrong. The first sip was a revelation, bright and complex, with notes of blueberry and chocolate and something almost wine-like. It was coffee, but elevated to something approaching art. Oh my God, I breathed, and Alex's face broke into the biggest smile I'd seen yet. Right? That's what coffee can be when someone gives a damn about it. I wanted to stay there all morning, talking with him about coffee and whatever else came to mind, but reality intruded in the form of my phone buzzing with work emails. I should go, I said reluctantly. Take it with you, Alex said, even though the cup was clearly meant for in-store consumption. Just bring it back tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow's Saturday. We're open weekends too, different vibe, but he shrugged, suddenly looking almost shy. Maybe you'll like it. I clutched the warm cup as I walked the 3 blocks to my office, savoring both the incredible coffee and the unexpected invitation. Saturday felt like a lifetime away, but I was there at 9 a.m. sharp, ceramic cup in hand and something that felt dangerously close to excitement in my chest. The Saturday morning atmosphere at Grind was completely different from the weekday rush. The pace was slower, more relaxed, with people lingering over newspapers and laptops. The lighting seemed softer, more golden, and there was jazz playing quietly in the background instead of the indie rock from earlier in the week. Alex was there, of course, but he looked different too. Instead of the efficient barista from the morning rush, he seemed more relaxed, more himself. His hair was slightly messed up, like he'd been running his hands through it, and he was wearing a simple gray t-shirt that clung to his shoulders in a way that made it hard to look away. "You came back," he said when he saw me, and his smile was warm enough to chase away the October chill. "I brought your cup," I said, holding it up like proof of my good intentions. "Thanks. So what did you think of your first real coffee experience?" "Honestly, it kind of ruined me for everything else." "That was the plan," he said with mock seriousness. "Total coffee corruption. You'll never be satisfied with mediocrity again." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both," he said, leaning against the counter with an easy confidence I hadn't seen during the busy weekday mornings. "So what can I make you today? Another pour-over? Or are you ready to explore the deeper mysteries of espresso-based drinks? What do you recommend? For someone who just discovered that coffee can be art, maybe a cappuccino. Real cappuccino, not the sugar bomb version from the chain places." I nodded, and he got to work with that same focused attention I was beginning to associate with him. But this time, without the pressure of a long line waiting, he talked as he worked. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began, tamping espresso grounds with practiced precision. "About simplicity, avoiding decisions. I get that, actually. The world's complicated enough without agonizing over every little choice." "Exactly. But sometimes the complications are worth it," he continued, positioning the portafilter and starting the extraction. "Like, yes, it's easier to just order black coffee and call it good. But then you miss out on discovering that you actually prefer cortados, or that Ethiopian pour-over can make you rethink everything you thought you knew about coffee." The espresso machine hissed and gurgled, and he began steaming milk with movements that were almost dance-like in their fluidity. "I guess what I'm saying is," he said, pouring the microfoam into the espresso with careful precision, creating a heart shape in the crema, "sometimes the best things happen when you're willing to complicate your routine a little." He slid the cappuccino across the counter, and I stared at the perfect heart floating on the surface. "Did you just give me a philosophy lesson disguised as a coffee order?" "Maybe," he said with a grin. "How's it taste?" The cappuccino was incredible, silky and rich, with the espresso flavor somehow both intensified and gentled by the perfectly textured milk. But more than that, it felt like a gift, something made specifically for me with care and attention. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. "Good. I was hoping—" "Alex." The purple-haired woman from the other day appeared beside him, nudging him with her elbow. "Stop flirting with the customers and help me with this espresso machine. It's making weird noises again." Alex flushed slightly but didn't deny the flirting comment, which sent a warm flutter through my chest. "Duty calls," he said apologetically, "but stick around if you want. I go on break in about an hour." I found a table by the window and settled in with my laptop, but I spent more time watching Alex work than getting anything productive done. There was something mesmerizing about the easy way he moved around the cramped space behind the counter. The genuine warmth he showed every customer, the obvious pride he took in his craft. And every so often he'd catch my eye and smile, a quick flash of connection across the busy coffee shop that made my heart skip. When his break came, he grabbed his own cup of coffee, something dark and complex smelling, and slid into the chair across from me. "Mind if I join you?" "Please," I said, closing my laptop. I wasn't getting much done anyway. "Saturday morning work?" "Always. The joys of a corporate salary, you're never really off the clock." He made a face. I remember that life. Everything urgent, nothing important. "What did you do before this?" "Marketing for a tech startup. 60-hour weeks, endless meetings about metrics and KPIs. Convincing people they needed products they definitely didn't need." He shook his head. "Took me way too long to realize I was miserable." "What changed?" "Honestly, a breakdown." He said it matter-of-factly, without shame or self-pity. "Panic attacks, insomnia, the whole deal. Couldn't get out of bed for about 2 weeks. When I finally could, I realized I had to make some serious changes." "And you chose coffee?" "I chose sanity," he said. The coffee was just the vehicle. I'd always been obsessed with it anyway. Had a whole setup at home, spent weekends visiting roasters and cafes. When the opportunity came up to buy into this place with my savings, it felt like the universe giving me a second chance. "Do you miss it, the corporate world?" "The money sometimes, but not the life." He looked around the coffee shop with obvious affection. "Here I get to make something people actually enjoy. I know my regular customers' names, their stories, their coffee preferences. When someone lights up after tasting something I've made, that means something, you know." I thought about my own job, the endless spreadsheets and presentations, the feeling of pushing numbers around without any real purpose or impact. When was the last time I'd made something that brought someone genuine joy? "That sounds amazing," I said, and I meant it. "What about you? What would you do if you could do anything?" The question caught me off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked me about dreams rather than quarterly targets or project deadlines. "I used to write," I said finally, "fiction mostly. Thought I'd be the next great novelist when I was 22 and stupid." "What happened to that?" "Reality, student loans, rent in Manhattan." I shrugged, trying to make it sound casual rather than like the slow death of everything I'd once cared about. "Writing doesn't pay the bills." "Have you tried lately, writing, I mean?" "Not in years. I tell myself I don't have time, but the truth is..." I paused, surprised by my own honesty. "The truth is I'm afraid I was never actually good at it, that it was just youthful arrogance." Alex was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles on the table. "You know what I think?" he said finally. "I think fear's just another kind of routine, another way of avoiding decisions, keeping things simple. But maybe some complications are worth it." He was echoing his earlier words, but this time they felt more personal, more pointed. "Even if you fail, especially if you might fail," he said, "because that means it matters enough to be scared of." We sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the Saturday morning foot traffic outside the window. There was something intimate about sharing this quiet moment with him, this conversation that had somehow moved beyond coffee and customer service into something more real. "I should let you get back to work," I said eventually, though I didn't want to leave. Actually, my shift ends in 10 minutes. Maya and Josh can handle the afternoon crowd. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. There's this bookstore a few blocks from here, literary fiction section that's dangerous for people with book addictions. Want to check it out? My heart started racing. This was definitely not customer service anymore. I'd like that, I said. The bookstore was a cramped, overstuffed wonderland that smelled like old paper and possibility. We wandered the narrow aisles together, pulling books from shelves and reading passages aloud to each other. Alex had strong opinions about contemporary fiction and an encyclopedic knowledge of coffee table books about coffee culture. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. "You should read this," he said, pressing a slim volume into my hands. Jess Walter, short stories that'll destroy you in the best possible way. I flipped through the pages, noting the elegant prose, the careful attention to character and place. "What makes you think I want to be destroyed?" "Everyone needs to be destroyed once in a while," he said seriously. "Otherwise, you start thinking the life you're living is the only life possible." We spent 2 hours in that bookstore, and when we finally left, I had a small stack of books tucked under my arm and something that felt dangerously close to hope blooming in my chest. "This was fun," Alex said as we stood on the sidewalk outside. "I don't usually—" "What?" "Spend my Saturday afternoons with customers," he finished with a self-conscious smile. "Is that what I am, a customer?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and the kind of nervous energy that comes with standing at the edge of something new. "I don't know," he said honestly. "What do you think?" Before I could answer, his phone buzzed and he glanced at it with a frown. "Shit. Family dinner I completely forgot about. I have to run." He looked genuinely disappointed. "But David, same time Monday morning? For coffee?" "For whatever comes next," he said, already backing away down the sidewalk. "Trust me?" "Yeah," I called after him. "I trust you." Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. I spent Sunday in a strange state of anticipation, reading one of the books Alex had recommended and finding myself constantly checking the clock. When had I become someone who looked forward to Monday mornings? When had a simple coffee run become the highlight of my routine? I arrived at Grind at my usual time, 7:45 a.m., right after the early commuter rush, but before the mid-morning crowd. Alex was there, of course, but something was different. He seemed more nervous than usual, fidgeting with the espresso machine and glancing toward the door every few seconds. "Morning," I said, approaching the counter. "David, hi." His smile was bright but slightly strained. "How was your weekend? Did you read any of those books?" Started the Jess Walter. "You were right. It's incredible." "Good. That's good." He was wiping down the counter with unnecessary intensity, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. Just, what can I get you?" It felt like a step backward, back to the formal customer service dynamic we'd moved beyond days ago. I felt a step of disappointment that maybe I'd misread the situation. Maybe Saturday had been just friendly customer service after all. "Surprise me," I said, watching his face for any sign of the easy intimacy we'd shared over the weekend. He nodded and got to work, but his movements seemed mechanical, lacking the usual joy and artistry I'd come to associate with watching him make coffee. He prepared what looked like another cortado, but when he handed it to me, our fingers didn't brush. He was careful to avoid any contact. "Thanks," I said, confused by the sudden distance. "Have a good day," he replied, already turning to the next customer. I found my usual table by the window and sat down with my coffee, trying to figure out what had changed. The cortado was perfect as always, but it tasted flat somehow, lacking the warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Maybe I'd imagined the connection between us. Maybe I'd projected my own attraction onto friendly customer service and a shared afternoon among the books. Maybe Alex was just good at his job, and I was just another customer who'd briefly caught his attention before he moved on to more interesting people. The thought depressed me more than it should have. I finished my coffee quickly and headed to work, trying to shake off the disappointment and get back to my regularly scheduled life of spreadsheets and meaningless meetings. But Tuesday morning found me back at grind anyway, unable to stay away despite the awkwardness of the day before. This time Alex's smile was more natural, less strained. "Cortado?" he asked, and I nodded. "How's the book?" "Finished it last night. You were right about the destruction part." "Good destruction or bad destruction?" "The kind that makes you question everything," I said, and something flickered in his eyes. "Those are the best stories," he said, beginning the familiar ritual of making my drink, the ones that get under your skin and stay there. We were back on steadier ground, talking about books and coffee with the easy familiarity I'd been missing. But there was still something held back in his manner, a careful distance that hadn't been there before Saturday. When he handed me my cortado, though, his fingers lingered against mine for just a moment, and I felt that familiar electric spark. "David," he said, his voice lower than usual, "about Saturday." "Yeah?" He glanced around the coffee shop, noting the line of customers waiting behind me, the purple-haired Maya watching us with obvious interest. "Nothing. Never mind. Enjoy your coffee." Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday followed the same pattern. Friendly conversation, perfect coffee, and an undercurrent of something unsaid hovering between us. I found myself staying longer each morning, lingering over my drink and watching Alex work, hoping for another moment like we'd shared in the bookstore. But every time it seemed like he might say something more personal, something real, he'd pull back into professional friendliness. By Friday, I was frustrated and confused. Had I misread everything? Was the attraction entirely one-sided? Was I turning into one of those customers who make service workers uncomfortable by projecting romantic interest where none existed? The thought made me cringe. Maybe it was time to find a different coffee shop, save us both the awkwardness of my obvious crush and his polite rejection. But Saturday morning found me walking those familiar 3 blocks anyway, telling myself it was just for the coffee, that I'd keep things strictly business from now on. The weekend atmosphere was the same as before, relaxed, golden, jazz playing softly in the background. But when I approached the counter, Alex looked almost nervous. "Morning, David." "Morning. Cortado, please." He nodded and got to work, but I could feel him glancing at me as I waited. The tension was thick enough to cut, and I was seriously considering just grabbing my coffee and leaving when he finally spoke. "Listen," he said, not looking up from the espresso machine, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "Monday. I was weird, and you didn't deserve that." "It's fine. I probably overstepped." "No." He looked up then, brown eyes serious. "You didn't overstep anything. I did." "What do you mean?" He finished preparing my cortado, but didn't hand it to me right away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair in that way that made my stomach flutter. "I had a really good time on Saturday," he said. "Better than I've had in a long time, and that scared the shit out of me." "Scared you?" "I don't usually. I mean, you're a customer and I work here, and there are all these professional boundaries that probably exist for good reasons." He was talking fast, words tumbling over each other. "But then you ask me what I'd recommend, and you actually listen when I explain pour-over techniques, and you let me drag you to a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon, and suddenly those boundaries feel really arbitrary and stupid. My heart was racing. Alex, I'm not good at this, he continued. Reading signals, knowing when someone is just being friendly versus when they're interested. My ex used to say I was oblivious about that stuff. And he was probably right, but there's something about the way you look at me when I'm making your coffee, something about the way you actually stay and talk instead of just grabbing your drink and running, and I keep thinking maybe what? Maybe I'm not imagining this thing between us. The coffee shop around us seemed to fade into background noise. All I could focus on was Alex's face, the vulnerability in his expression, the hope mixed with fear in his brown eyes. You're not imagining it, I said softly. His whole body seemed to relax. Tension I hadn't even noticed he was carrying flowing out of his shoulders. Okay, he said, and his smile was brilliant. Okay, good, because I was starting to think I was losing my mind. So what happens now? Now, he slid my cortado across the counter, and this time, when our fingers touched, he didn't pull away. Now I ask if you want to get dinner sometime, somewhere that doesn't involve me serving you caffeinated beverages. I'd like that, I said, probably grinning like an idiot. Tonight? I know it's short notice, but I get off at 6 and there's this little Italian place a few blocks from here that makes pasta that's almost as good as their espresso. Tonight sounds perfect. Great, amazing. He paused, suddenly seeming to remember where we were. I should probably serve these other customers before Maya stages a revolt. I looked around and realized there was indeed a line forming behind me. People waiting patiently for their Saturday morning coffee while I'd been having what was apparently a very public moment of romantic breakthrough. Right, I'll see you tonight. 6 o'clock, he confirmed. Man.